Good evening, and welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. I'm Bob Delaney, Executive Director of the Institute for Labor Studies and Research. Labor Vision, a production of the Institute, focuses on topics of importance and interest to working Rhode Islanders. We hope you enjoy this evening's edition.
It is my privilege to introduce our featured speaker, luncheon speaker, Peter Kendall. I've known Peter for, I guess, most of his life. He's a very close friend of one of my sons. Peter, just to give you a little history, is a graduate of Archbishop Williams High School in Braintree, Mass. And in his senior year, he was identified as the premier football player in New England by the McDonald's Corporation. Following his career at Archbishop Williams, there were many offers for college football scholarships, and I can remember, he's probably forgotten this, but I can remember saying to him, "Now look, Peter, you're a bright guy, so you want to capitalize on that, and you want to go to a school that has a top-rate football program. So, forget all the others. There's only two, Notre Dame and Stanford." And, of course, he went to Boston College. Well, he graduated. He was a major in marketing, and he was then drafted in the first round. I think he was the 21st selection by the Seattle Seahawks. And over the course of his career, he has played for Seattle, Arizona, the New York Jets, and the Washington Redskins. I think I could probably safely say this about Peter. He's had a 13-year career in the NFL, and the average career life is 4 years. So that tells you something about him. But as far as his professional life is concerned, he's intelligent. He's always in shape. Look at him now. And he's feisty, But on his personal side, he's kind and he's thoughtful and he's generous. And, I think that is perhaps even more important. I can remember when he was on the road at college, and when he was in college and in the pros, every Thanksgiving and every Christmas time, he called the family to ask how everyone was and so forth. How many young men would do that? So he's always been a favorite, especially of my wife's. When he retired from playing, he now is engaged in the negotiations that hopefully will culminate in a new collective bargaining agreement. And of course, I became a little uneasy 2 days ago, when there was a report out that perhaps it would be signed and sealed by yesterday. But of course, that hasn't happened yet, and it may not happen in the near future. Only time will tell. Peter has to leave. He'll stay and answer as many questions as he can. He may not be able to give you the responses that you want because of the confidence that he must hold, but he then has to go to a meeting with the owners and the players and at an undisclosed location. So we can just speculate on where that might be. But it's my pleasure, my distinct pleasure, to introduce Peter Kendall, the National Football League Players Association.
What do you think? Not quite as tall as you used to be. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you, Mr. O'Brien, and the members of the Quirk Institute for inviting me. It's This is one of the few things I actually really enjoy talking about. So as we get going today, I'll try to keep my prepared remarks brief and hope that there's enough interest in the room from you folks that I might be able to specifically answer your questions. Before we get going, though, I would like to share just a couple of stories of my time with Mr. O'Brien and his family growing up. Two very quick stories. Number one, the only reason that I went to Boston College, and Frank, I think you remember in the back of the room, try as we did, we couldn't get Providence to start a Division I football program in time for me, so I had to move on to greener pastures. And this story, I think, really reflects the values that Mr. O'Brien has and his family have. It was probably early 1997. I had just returned from my rookie season out in Seattle. As Mr. O'Brien indicated, I was drafted in the first round and had made a couple of bucks for doing so, and came back to visit just after the holidays. And Mrs. O'Brien asked me, "Now, what are you going to do now, Peter, that you're not working?" So I told her I was going to stock shelves at the local Osco Drug and maybe hope to be assistant manager before the next season started. If only I had, right? So anyways, I thought I would just give a brief history of how we arrived at where we are today, which is 100 plus days in a lockout. But I won't go all the way back. I'll go back as far as 1993 and the Reggie White versus NFL settlement, which led to the collective bargaining agreement that just expired in March. Essentially, the White settlement and the White case was about free agency. It brought about free agency more or less as we know it today. Players play 4 years with an expired contract. They're free to shop their services to whomever and play wherever it is that they might be able to find a contract. That collective bargaining agreement has been extended at least 4 times, or had been extended 4 times, 1998, 2002, 2004, and 2006. And the 2006 deal really was noteworthy because it introduced revenue sharing between the owners on a far greater scale than it had in the past. And that revenue sharing between the owners really has become an issue that has manifested itself in the labor negotiations that are ongoing. So how did we get specifically to this lockout down? Well, this all started quite literally almost as soon as the ink was dry on the 2006 extension. In 2007, after just 1 season under the new deal, the NFL hired a gentleman by the name of Bob Batterman, who hockey fans might find familiar. Bob was the man who helped steer ownership through their lockout of the players, a season-long lockout of the NHL players, and ultimately their new collective bargaining agreement. For those who like to dabble in the stock market, you'll recall that in 2007, the stock market hadn't yet hit its highs. It was, I believe, in the fall of 2007 that the Dow was north of 14,000. In May of 2008, at the earliest possible juncture, the NFL decided to exercise their contractual right to opt out of the collective bargaining agreement, setting in motion a series of events that included an uncapped year, which we just came through in 2010, where there were no retirement benefits for players. And since then, health benefits have also been terminated pending the resolution. In 2008, the NFL also sought to renegotiate its television contracts with all of its TV partners, Fox, CBS, ESPN, DirecTV, as well as some of its digital communication rights with Verizon. The NFL players brought suit in federal court in Minnesota, arguing that the NFL had violated its fiduciary duty to maximize revenues in all of its dealings for both itself and for its partners in renegotiating the television contracts. And in essence, what they did is they negotiated the television contracts such that they would have money due to them and payable in 2011 this year, whether there was football or not. Some of that money would be simply a gift and not repayable, and some of that money would be paid back at money market rates. And for those of us who save, you realize that money market rates aren't that steep, so that wasn't a very big bill for them to come due. anyhow, that case has been tried. There has been a preliminary ruling. It's not very favorable for the owners. We are awaiting a final decision on an award of damages. Damages could be anything from additional monies paid to the players to escrowing essentially the NFL's money such that they don't have access to it during the season, to a combination of them both, which I guess would probably be a best case scenario for the players. So what are the issues that are keeping labor and management apart? I think before we get to what the issue is between owners and players, I think it's probably instructive to understand what are the issues between owners and owners. And in my opinion, that is probably the reason that we have this issue right now, is that there are unresolved issues from the 2006 deal about how to split the money. So in a nutshell, the way money is generated in the NFL is national money, which is essentially your properties, your television rights, and then you have your local revenue streams, which would be naming rights, gates, concessions, parking, jersey sales, and the such. For calculating the salary cap, all of the money essentially was thrown into a pile and divided by 32, and that was what the players' portion of the salary cap would be. And so if you had, say, $10 billion in revenue and the player's portion was 50%, you would take 10 billion, divide it by 5, and that player's portion would be 5 billion, then you would divide it by 32, and roughly that's how you would come up with a salary cap number. Seems simple enough. The problem is that the money isn't generated equally, even though it's allocated equally. And so, as an example, you could have a league-wide salary cap of 150 million. Team A could be a small market team that has revenues national plus local revenues of, say, 250 million, whereas Team B, when you pooled their revenues national, their share of the national plus the local revenues they generated, they could have upwards of, say, $400 million in revenue. And so the obligation for the team with 250 million to spend 150 million, obviously that is much harder for them than it is for the team with 400 million. And so that really is where we are today, that tension back and forth between the bigger market teams or the more entrepreneurial teams that are willing and have been able to invest in initiatives such as stadiums, getting the naming rights, private seat licenses, club seats, luxury boxes of the such. What you have is an instance where, for an example, Jerry Jones just sunk about $1.2 billion into the ground in Dallas and built a beautiful football cathedral. Took a lot of risk, has a lot of debt, I'm sure. Versus juxtapose that to, say, Mike Brown in Cincinnati, whose stadium is relatively new, but he's refused to sell the naming rights to that stadium so that he can honor his father. And as admirable as that may be, it does create a tension because there's money left on the table that otherwise Mike could use to not only pay the players, but to lessen his need to share revenue with owners who are being aggressive in trying to find new ways to generate revenue. What are the owner-player issues? And really it just comes down to dollars and cents. The issue at hand is, how do we split the money? What is a fair allocation of revenues towards players, and what's a fair allocation for the owners to run their business? The split in the past has always taken into account that it's in the players' best interest, that the owners have incentive to invest, and so there's been a program called the G3 program, where players give a deduction against the cap to teams that go and build stadium. The logic being that playing in a newer, bigger stadium with more bells and whistles ultimately generates more revenue, which ultimately winds up flowing back into the players' pockets as well. One of the issues going forward as we talk about the incentive to invest is are we going to continue that program? Are we going to expand that program? Are we going to help the NFL get into California, which is going to be an issue at some point? There's a stadium group that doesn't have a team yet, but seems well down the road to having a stadium. And it's sure California will have, or at least the Los Angeles market will have a new team, and it's quite likely that either San Diego or the Bay Area teams will have new stadiums in the not too distant future either. The only other issue that really separates players and owners, or had to March 11th when the players decertified, was the issue of how to address rookies. There's been a lot of talk that the NFL should have an NBA-style wage scale that would essentially eliminate all bargaining between player, agent, and team, and simply have a slotting system very similar to the NBA. The players have resisted that to this point. It is more, from the players' perspective, they understand that drafting a Ryan Leaf or a Jamarcus Russell or a player at the very top of the draft who doesn't work out and handing him huge sums of money is not in anybody's best interest. And so the two parties have worked to try and craft a system such that the money that would otherwise go to an unproven player will find its way back to retired players, and find its way back to proven performers in the locker room, veteran players, and also trying to find a way to give the first-round draft picks particularly an opportunity to earn the money that, say, a Sam Bradford or a top pick in years past may have earned, give him an opportunity to try and earn that money back. So with that, I would say that's about the crux of the issue. I noticed that we also spoke about pensions here earlier, and I'm fairly well versed in the NFL's version of retirement. So if anybody has any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer those questions. And beyond that, I'm open to any questions at this point. I don't think it's a problem. It certainly is an issue that presents itself, and that's a bit more on the owner versus owner issue, right? So one of the unique things about where we are and where we've been is that it only takes nine owners to torpedo a deal. And so the commissioner has to negotiate a deal that at least 24 owners will say yes to. But as you pointed out, different ownership groups have different aims in owning the team. Some ownership groups, football is all that they do. And so they're sometimes much more risk averse than somebody who the ownership of an NFL team sort of fits under a larger umbrella of industries or corporations that they may own. Some of them just have so much money they couldn't lose it all if they tried, and so being aggressive and competing to win championships is something that they want to do. And again, some other people have taken the position that they need to be much more fiscally responsible, and so that makes it a very sticky widget. Is how do you craft a deal that makes at least 24 owners feel comfortable because they don't all approach it from the same angle. There is not a union authorized to negotiate on behalf of the members. What we have now are technically settlement talks. There's a lawsuit pending, Brady et al. Versus the NFL on antitrust challenge. And so Damaris Smith, who's the head of the Players Association, is also an attorney. And so he serves as advisor to that class, but there is not, as you pointed out, there is not a unit that is authorized to collectively bargain at this point. Well, the last time we were down this road, one of the preconditions of the settlement in the White case was that ownership demanded that the players recertify as a union so that they could enjoy their antitrust exemptions. I couldn't tell you where the talks stand now, if that's a part of it or not, but that is what happened in the past. The question is, what was the rationale for decertifying, and was it tied to the antitrust statutes? And the answer is that's absolutely what it was. The players had negotiated in good faith up and until the deadline, extended the deadline first for one day and then for a week. But at that point, it became clear, as the federal mediator himself said, that he saw no point in continuing mediation. At that point, the players had to make a choice. Were they going to be simply stand together as a union and be locked out, or were they going to renounce their status as a union and take the case through the courts under antitrust statutes? And it was a decision that was certainly not entered into lightly. There were a lot of, as I'm sure everybody in here knows, there are a lot of benefits conferred upon unions that otherwise don't exist. And the players lost their right not only to strike, they lost their right to have union sponsorship or union attorneys represent them in appeals and grievances. But at the end of the day, the decision was made that in order to get a deal that allowed the players to play in 2011, that they would have to challenge the NFL's lockout in court. And right now, that the decision on that is still pending. It's a bit of a moving target, but I think most people agree to have a season with zero interruption. We probably need to have a deal struck by the Independence Day holiday in that neighborhood. The prevailing logic is that the teams are going to need 4 or 5 days to sort of absorb what the new rules of the road are. And then there needs to be some time for free agency, both unrestricted free agents and also undrafted college free agents. The first training camp, I believe, is scheduled to open right around the 22nd of July, and the first preseason game, I believe, is the 7th or 8th of August. So we are getting to a point now where it's becoming critical if we're not going to have any interruption. However, I would hasten to add that the NFL has built into its schedule a little bit of a cushion so that if there were games lost, particularly regular season games lost, that they could be made up on the back end in a season that very well may end on President's Day weekend, which is, I believe, the third weekend in February with the Super Bowl in Indianapolis. I think I give the commissioner a great deal of credit for the emphasis that he's placed on player health and safety. Certainly the representatives of the Players Association deserve a great deal of credit for pushing the issue as well. It really has not been a very contentious issue between the parties. There seems to be broad recognition from both that there are issues about player health and safety that continually need to be addressed, and particularly the concussion issue. Unfortunately, the science is a little bit incomplete at this point, but where it's pointing is not down a good road. And so to be proactive, again, to the NFL's credit, to be proactive, they are trying to find as many ways as they can to keep the game resembling the game that we all know, but also to try and make it as safe as it can be. The question was, are guaranteed contracts an issue? Guaranteed contracts are not, certainly not the reason why the players are locked out at this point. Every player would like to have guaranteed contracts, but the way that the NFL has worked in the last 20 years, I think is a system that the players could continue to live with. As it turns out, roughly speaking, 50% of every contract winds up being guaranteed, whether it be the player playing. And so the first year of a contract, even though it may not be guaranteed, it's essentially guaranteed, particularly for a veteran free agent, because why else would a team sign you in March and let you go in August? The other way that compensation becomes guaranteed is through signing bonus. And so that's why you see every player push for as much of a signing bonus as they can get, because beyond just a few reasons, such as quitting, oftentimes a signing bonus is unrecoverable for a team. Well, you're right. If ultimately the two sides can't come to some sort of mutually beneficial agreement, it will be a lose-lose. As John Mara, the owner of the Giants, has said, and Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, said, at the end of the day, we have to have a fair deal that works for both sides, or we'll be back in this position in the not too distant future. And so I'm sure everybody in this room has much more of a history in negotiation than I do, but my definition of fair and your definition of fair sometimes aren't always the same. I would say that that's highly unlikely. Right now, the parties are trying to reach an agreement without any more input from the courts. However, it is moving on a parallel track through the courts. The players and the owners are waiting on a decision from a federal district judge on damages due to the television case that I alluded to earlier. And we're also waiting on a decision from the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals as to the legality of the lockout, and if it's legal, how long can it stay in place with a decertified, non-unionized workplace. So there will still be potentially more data points, if you will, that would push things along, but I think the parties are fairly committed to trying to do something sooner rather than later. No, I think in every business, especially professional sports, times change, and sometimes there has to be a reset. And you do, unfortunately, have work stoppages, whether it be a strike or a lockout. But at the end of it, the game always comes back. You can question whether or not the game comes back as strong as it used to be. The NHL, Major League Baseball, certainly, I think, are good examples of the fact that you can damage the golden goose without outright killing it. You can damage it, and I think both parties are very mindful of that. It's my understanding that all of the other sports leagues are paying very close attention to all of this. The NBA's collective bargaining agreement is due to expire, I believe, in a week or so, and their situation is a little bit different than the NFL situation, in that they have released their books. Whether or not those books are more fact or more fiction, I guess, will be determined by the NBA's representatives. But they've made the claim that at least half the teams are losing money, whereas no NFL team has made the claim that they're losing any money. It's just they're not making enough. So to circle back, depending on what comes out of this, depending on potentially what court rulings come down, is certainly going to keep the attention of every other sports league. Well, this is a consulting position that I took. It wasn't. It's sort of they picked me, not me picked them. In 2009, I was fully expecting to play another season of football, but for one reason or another, the phone didn't ring. But I had been active in the Players Association for the last half dozen or so years, and had established a little bit of a rapport with our then newly elected executive director, Damaris Smith. And so what happened was, in the late fall of 2009, negotiations were starting to ramp up between the parties. And Damaris wanted somebody who had some knowledge of the issues, had some relationship with the then active players, who also had some availability. And unfortunately, I fit the bill on all three. And so at that point, he said, "Look, we're going to meet with ownership, and if it's okay with you, we'd like to have you on board. We'll create a position for you and get you involved." And so that's how I've been there. I don't know necessarily why he chose me over countless other people. I'm thankful that he did. One of the most misunderstood issues surrounding the NFL, and it's really sort of bifurcated. There's retirement post the White settlement in 1993, and then there's retirement before. And you hear a lot, and rightfully so, about the plight of players who played before 1993, men who built the game, who have pensions that need to be addressed. They have retirement issues that need to be addressed. And again, to the credit, I think, of both parties, those issues have been really thought over, and I think that there will be some significant address for those. But moving to I think what is your question now, the NFL retirement is set up in steps, as opposed to simply a defined benefit pension, if you will, awaiting players at 55. The way our system works now is as follows. For players who vest, when you leave the game, you get 1 year after you leave the game, you get what's called a severance check. And it's simply a function of how many years you played times a fixed rate. You get that check. 5 years after that, you get access to your annuity. It's 5 years or after 35, whichever comes later. And so after your second year in the league, the team gives you a contribution to an annuity, and the annuity is split in two. Some of it is tax preferred, and some of it's not quite as tax efficient. And I think it's just That is more of a relic of the tax laws changing after the system was put in place. So 35 or 5 years out, you have access to your annuity. At 40, you can take it as a lump sum, or you can continue just to receive distributions. You can leave it alone until, I believe, age 70, and then it's mandatory distributions or withdrawal. There's also a 401k program that the league has put in place for the players. They will match your contribution up to, I believe, and that changes every year too with the tax code, but I believe it's up to $20,000 or $21,000. And again, as one of the gentlemen speaking earlier indicated, the NFL has a plan where you have to opt out as opposed to opt in, which is a very welcome change, because as you can imagine, trying to talk to 21-year-old kids about retirement is not what they want to talk about in the middle of training camp, right? So the players have access to their 401k. I believe it's federally mandated that you can't touch that without penalty until 59 and a half. And then finally, the players also have pension benefit. And again, that's a function of years of service. You have to play 3 years in order to qualify for a pension. And then you continue to add benefit to that per each year played. So those are the four major retirement benefits. There also has been, in the last 5 to 7 years, the addition of a health savings account, which is $25,000 per year played, with a max capped at 12 years. And the NFL and the players have decided to also increase what they call Plan 88 after a gentleman by the name of John Mackey, who was a Hall of Fame tight end for the Baltimore Colts and now suffers from severe dementia or Alzheimer's, so they've increased a benefit. Again, going back to the earlier question about concussions, to try and address those issues, and that is split, I believe, more money for institutional care, somewhat less money for in-home care. And the final retirement piece that is a little bit retirement, a little bit outside retirement, would be the workers' compensation system, which varies from state to state. I want to make sure I understand the question. Since there's no union right now, because there is an association, but it doesn't have a union status. Since there's no union, if the ruling comes back that the lockout is illegal and that the judges lift the lockout, can the owners mandate that the players reunionize before they let them in? Well, the players petitioned the courts for the right to work, so I don't think it's going to be very difficult once the lockout is lifted to get the players to report back to work. I don't have a law degree, but it's my understanding that you cannot force anybody to be a member of a union, nor can you dissuade people from joining a union. So my layman's answer would be is that if the court rules that the lockout is illegal, I think that the NFL has to be open for business in fairly short order. That looks like all. I really appreciate your time today. I hope I was able to shed some light on some issues.
Thank you, Peter.
Enjoyed Pete's comments very much. Very interesting presentation. Well, thank you all for hanging in until the end of today's program. The annual John H. Fanning Conference is about to come to its conclusion with what's my favorite part. Having been a Quirk Award winner, I am very honored and blessed to be a participant in today's program to present the award to this year's award winners. This award is granted by the steering committee, elects its recipients based on a lot of factors, the majority being it's the award winner's contribution to this industry we call labor relations, which few understand, but everybody out there in the world seems to want to be an expert at until they have to get in the room and make it happen, and we all know how difficult that is. So today's awards, there are three specific awards. One is granted to a neutral, one is granted to a management advocate, and one to a union advocate. And we have three superlative award winners today. So I'm going to read the awards. We'll do them in alphabetical order. And the first is our neutral advocate, Matt Boda. Matt, you are a professor of industrial relations and research director of the Schmidt Labor Research Center at the University of Rhode Island. You're also a chair of URI's Department of Economics. You graduated from Providence College, hold a master's degree from the University of Rhode Island, and a PhD from the School of Labor and Industrial Relations at Michigan State University. In your capacity as professor, you teach courses in labor relations, compensation administration, and industrial sociology. You're also a labor arbitrator, well known to many of this room, and mediator, and you're listed with the American Arbitration Association, the Labor Relations Connection, and the Rhode Island Department of Labor and Training. You've published widely in scholarly journals, including Industrial Relations, the Journal of Labor Research, the Labor Studies Journal, and the Labor Law Journal. Your work on project labor agreements was recently cited by the New York Times. You serve on boards of several nonprofit organizations, including Building Futures and the National Chapter Advisory Committee of the Labor and Employee Relations Association. The Quirk Institute of Industrial Relations at Providence College is indeed proud to present to you Matthew M. Boda with the Reverend Charles B. Quirk OP Award in recognition of your many exemplary contributions to furthering the cause of industrial peace. Matt.
Well, let me get this up a little bit here. I want to thank Frank and the committee of this conference for honoring me. It's just a tremendous honor to receive this award today, and doubly so receiving it at the same time as Vin and Marilyn, two people who are well known, have great reputations in the field. I just want to say just a couple words here, because this is I think it's a deeply personal award for me. As was mentioned, I'm a graduate of Providence College. And let me just say this, when the conversation with friends or family turns to my years between age 18 and 22, I usually try to change the subject, okay? And if that doesn't work, then I think that the adjective restless comes up quite often. I sort of bounced around a bit after high school, went to this school and that school, attended bar, banged nails. Banging nails taught me a good lesson that it's a lot better to study labor than to actually do it. But anyway, somehow through the grace of God, I wound up on this campus in the School of Continuing Education taking courses through the Quirk Institute in the winter, January of 1981. Had some excellent instructors who are here today, some of them, Ed, and actually I somehow escaped ever having Frank for a course. I don't know how that happened, but Jerry Cobley was an adjunct instructor, and Ed McElroy was an instructor here, and it really got me on a path of intellectual exploration that continues till today. So, you know, it's deeply personal for me to receive this. And then just one final thing I'll say here, too, is that today is June 23rd, which my father died a number of years ago, but if he were still alive, it would be his 90th birthday today. And so it's a meaningful day for me. My father was the vice president and general manager of Bonanza Bus Lines and its predecessor, the Shortline Company. Those of you who've been around Rhode Island long enough can remember Shortline. And one of the things in his portfolio was collective bargaining, and it was something that I know he valued a great deal. His relationship with the union, that part of his job. One thing I keep in my office is a plaque that he received from the ATU local, I think it's 1363 at Bonanza, thanking him for his years of service, particularly on their hourly employee. He was a management trustee of the hourly employee pension plan. And, you know, so I know that was collective bargaining, industrial relations was something that was very valuable to him. We didn't talk that much about it at the time because he retired in 1983. It was a little bit before I really started to get involved. But occasionally we would. And I remember when I first started getting involved in arbitration and interested in arbitration, I asked him, I said, Dad, could you tell me a little bit about your experiences in arbitration? And he said, no, because, you know, in 30 years of doing it, I never had a case go to arbitration. You know, we never had anything go to arbitration. I said, well, that's pretty remarkable. You know, how did you do that? And he would mention one of the former presidents of the union, Mickey Lynch or Walter Ashworth, and said, you know, we'd go over to Players Corner or to Murphy's, and we'd have a few beers, and we would just resolve it. I have to say, now that I'm a labor arbitrator, I'm not that fond of quite that level of labor management cooperation. But one thing I think he taught me, even though we didn't discuss it a whole lot, was that, you know, even though there are always going to be disagreements in the workplace, if we can sit down and, you know, civilly and with respect, work on those disagreements, you know, it will not destroy relationships, will build relationships and actually lead to greater business performance. So on that note, I'd like to thank you again, thank the Quirk Institute, Providence College for this award. It really means a lot to me. Thank you very much.
Our next award recipient is the Labor Advocacy recipient, and I'd like to read his award as well. Vincent Santaniello, for more than 36 years, you've been engaged in the field of labor relations. After receiving your bachelor's degree and your MBA from the University of Rhode Island, you joined the National Education Association of Rhode Island as a field representative in 1975. In this capacity, you're responsible for collective bargaining, grievance processing, presenting arbitration cases, and resolving member complaints. You attended law school in the evenings and received your JD degree in 1987. You then practiced law with a firm of Urso, Ligori, and Urso, which served as general counsel to the NEARI. You returned to NEARI in 1989, and since then have been responsible for its field services and legal services programs. Today, you are Deputy Executive Director of the National Education Association of Rhode Island and continue to practice labor law as their legal counsel. The Quirk Institute of Industrial Relations at Providence College is indeed proud to present to you Vincent P. Santiello with the Reverend Charles B. Quirk OP Award in recognition of your many exemplary contributions to furthering the cause of industrial peace. Vinny.
I have to say, I don't see him too often now, but Vinny and I go back to the year one.
I would like to thank the committee, the Institute, and Providence College for considering me in a state that is replete with highly competent union advocates. I'm truly honored to have been the recipient of this award, especially since I went to URI. No, and my first and very lengthy thoughts of PC were always, you know, not the best given the basketball history. The 36 years have tripped by in an amazingly short period of time. I look around, Frank's not the only one I've known from year one. I see a couple of other gray-haired persons around here, Rick Riley in particular. And those 36 years have been years of great excitement, great learning, great pride, and sometimes some great humility. And I have recently submitted my letter of retirement to the NAA Rhode Island. My last day as a full-time Deputy Executive Director will be July 29th. And so this award is particularly poignant to me coming at this twilight, if it is, in my full-time career. I promised to keep trying to work a little bit part-time, however, as outside counsel. Again, I want to thank everyone for considering me for this award. I'm truly honored, and I wish those of you who will continue the fight on our behalf all the best. Thank you.
Benny talked about the twilight of his career. The next award recipient, I had the pleasure of working with her dad for 25 years. And it just reminds me of how long I've been in this business, which is a little bit longer than Vinny. Not quite, but a bit longer. The award for this year's Management Advocate belongs to Marilyn Walsh, and I'd like to read her certificate. Marilyn, for more than 35 years, you've been in a caring profession, first as a nurse and then as a healthcare executive. Your extensive career has combined your healthcare background and experience in hospital operations and clinical and administrative patient care with human resources and labor management. You graduated from Rhode Island College with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing in 1975, earned your MBA with a healthcare concentration from Bryant University in 1986. Since 1996, you've worked for Care New England, first as Vice President for Employee and Labor Relations, and since 2006 as its Senior Vice President for Human Resources. In this capacity, you've guided the development and implementation of the Human Resources vision, strategy, and initiatives for the company. You're a member of many professional organizations, including the American Arbitration Association, the Human Resources Management Association of Rhode Island, the Society of Human Resources Management, and the Association for Healthcare HR Administration of Rhode Island. In 2007, you were named a Fellow of the American College of Healthcare Executives. You're on the governing board of the Urban League of Rhode Island and the South Providence Development Corporation, Cleanscape Incorporated. The Quirk Institute of Industrial Relations at Providence College is indeed proud to present to you Marilyn J. Walsh with the Reverend Charles B. Quirk OP Award in recognition of your many exemplary contributions to furthering the cause of industrial peace. Marilyn.
Thank you all so much. When Bruce first called me, I was wondering if this was an award like for seniority or something like that. I am very appreciative of all the talent and experience and knowledge in this room. I've worked with a number of people here from both sides of the equation for very many years, and this means a lot to me. So thank you so much. Thank you for considering me. I truly appreciate it, and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you for joining us for this evening's edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen 3 times each week here on Channel 14. Join us on Tuesdays at 7 p.m., Thursdays at 8 p.m., and Saturdays at 5 p.m. For nearly 30 years, the Institute for Labor Studies and Research has been growing unions and building futures. Since it first opened its doors on 15 Jefferson Street near the State House, the Institute has offered education and training programs to more than 125,000 working Rhode Islanders. In a rapidly changing economy, employers need a workforce that's able to adapt to change. The Institute is committed to offering programs that provide our students with the skills to meet the demands of this new economy. Our programs range from Worksite English as a second language and GED classes, Worksite Spanish, targeted to more than 22 specific industries and professions, customized computer training, ranging from beginner to advanced, national certification preparation classes in water distribution, and a host of other offerings designed to make program participants more effective at their jobs.
We were one of the first in Rhode Island, probably over 22 years or thereabouts. We had a number of nursing homes that it really made a difference in the lives of the workers in places where Spanish-speaking and Portuguese-speaking workers were able to pick up English as a second language.
Becoming proficient in English is going to help them progress in the union, in life in general.
It was the institute that we turned to teach our teachers how to speak conversational Spanish so that our teachers could communicate with the parents of our children.
3 decades has been working hand over fist to try and bring education and knowledge to ordinary working people, regardless of where they work.
To be able to do it at work takes a great burden off people, and the Institute provided the classes, provided wonderful teachers that understood where people were coming from.
Absolutely incredible the way she worked with the students. And she geared the whole curriculum around health and safety. Not only general health and safety, but she also took part of my curriculum that they need to have. We have to have 144 hours a year, and she utilized that and made it part of her curriculum.
Most recently, we have announced our partnership with the National Labor College in Silver Spring, Maryland, and the establishment here at the Institute of the Edward J. McElroy Satellite of the National Labor College to service members of organized labor throughout New England.
We can accredit apprenticeship training and couple those experiences and courses done in labor education.
Be able to actually have our kids go through school and actually qualify with our credits we get for the apprentice program.
So individuals now here in Rhode Island can get a bachelor's degree in labor studies right here in Rhode Island at the Institute.
I see people going on from simply taking a course here to going to the community college to get maybe a 4-year bachelor's degree while they're still working. And every once in a while, somebody comes down to URI and gets a master's degree in labor and industrial relations. That's what the labor movement's about, moving people up and forward.
The Institute has always considered education of union stewards and labor leaders to be one of its primary functions, and as such, has created an extensive list of course offerings such as basic and advanced steward training, labor relations and employment law, lobbying and political action, effective communication, negotiations and grievance training, and workplace health and safety.
I was fortunate enough to take some Spanish classes there, along with some postal workers. There were some laborers there, some teachers, and that was very helpful for my training in organizing.
The Institute has provided customized training for us for our building delegates who are known as shop stewards out there in the other world.
The benefit of having relationships with the unionized construction industry because of our substantial investments in things such as apprenticeship and training.
They need it for personal development, but more importantly, if the labor movement is to regain its vitality and to regain its strength, we need a level playing field.
We're very excited about our own Union Steward Seminar, which is coming up in a couple of months, and the Institute for Labor Studies is going to put the training on for us. That's one of the things that they do. They're always here to help labor.
Our Leadership for a Future program provides a leadership training environment for emerging and established leaders from community groups, labor unions, and religious community. Leadership for a Future also provides an opportunity for leaders from diverse groups and backgrounds to forge relationships and networks that will benefit themselves and their organizations through their lives.
What initially attracted me to the program was some of our leaders with the laborers. They had discussions with people at the Rhode Island AFL-CIO, and it was impressed upon me that this was a very important program, a new program that had a lot to offer, which happened to be the case.
When you look at Leadership for a Future, I mean, that says it all right there, is that, you know, in Rhode Island, we need leaders to step up to make us stronger in the future, and I wanted to learn how to be a part of that.
The leaders of the labor movement in Rhode Island are going to come from individuals who take courses in leadership and development here at the Institute.
If you want to learn from a group of faculty who will help you do the best you can and build all the skills you need to be a really effective community advocate, Leadership for a Future is the program for you.
The Institute for Labor Studies and Research has produced Labor Vision continuously since 1986. It is the only television show dedicated exclusively to covering issues that concern Rhode Islanders and their families. In addition to the regular coverage of a range of topics, Labor Vision each month chooses a current issue to explore in depth. Labor Vision interviews people on the street, on the job, and at conferences and meetings about the issues that matter to them. Each month, experts and community leaders come together to form a panel to discuss a timely issue.
In that program, we have interviews with people who are newsmakers in the labor community, maybe people who are sympathetic to ordinary working people, even if they're not in a union. We present rallies and demonstrations, discussions of important points of order.
And we're very grateful to have that opportunity to be able to reach out and let the world know what we think is important for their children and what's important for education.
It's our thing. It talks about us. It speaks truth to power. We're the stars in the TV shows that come on Labor Vision. And it talks about all the good work that the Institute cares about and the labor movement cares about.
Employee Free Choice Act. Everybody's standard of living improves.
Where people are actually compensated.
People can earn enough.
And not have to go through that fight and that intimidation and that fear.
The worst employer in the world.
Elvis Figueroa.
A Marshall Plan for the economy.
It requires a first contract. It requires mediation. If you can't reach a first contract within a year.
It'll help the labor movement.
It's going to inhibit a lot of these employers from saying, I'm just going to fire 3 guys and we can just stop this right here.
What this act is going to do is put the choice into the hands of the workers.
We can get Congress to pass this. This is the right thing. Let's do something right for once.
The Institute for Labor Studies and Research has trained more than 125,000 members of organized labor and working Rhode Islanders. We're very proud of that accomplishment, and we look to 125,000 more in the next 30 years.
Together, we'll build something that people 30 years from now will look back on and pay honor to as well.